Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, or afternoon here in Philadelphia anyway. Thank you for joining us for this next family panel on academic support and community standards. We are so excited to have your students join us this fall. I am sure there are a lot of questions, concerns, and also a lot of excitement about coming and joining us on our campus. We are going to talk to you today about exactly what the panel is called, academic support and our community standards. My name is Paige Wigginton. I am the executive director of the Center for Community Standards and Accountability. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. As your students are doing their TAP modules and everything, these names of offices should sound relatively familiar to you, but we'll dive in a little deeper today with you. As we go on, and I'm going to introduce my colleague Jane here in a second, as we go on, and we're going to give you a little bit of content up front about our different offices and the way that we support the academic mission here at Penn. And during those, feel free to submit any questions, anything within the chat. We're happy to look those over. As we're presenting, we may not get to them immediately, but we will review them and answer as best we can and direct you to the right resources, links, phone numbers, and so on. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jane, and we're so grateful that you all are here today.
Thank you so much, Paige, and welcome to everyone. This morning, I had the opportunity of welcoming the class to the dental school. They have an earlier start time of their new student orientation. And as I always tell people, when I look at calendars, I always consider August, September to be the beginning of a new year. People might not have done well their previous semester or had some struggles, but you start anew in August and September. So this is an exciting time for your children, your students, as well as the family, because a young one is coming to campus. So again, my name is Jane Holahan. I work in the Weingarten Center. We are an office under the Division of University Life, and we call ourselves Penn's Home for Academic Support and Disability Services. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over what we do here in the Weingarten Center. And as Paige said, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and we can try to answer those later on during the presentation. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation right now. So let me do this first. Here we go. All right, here we are. So let me start with what we do here in the Weingarten Center. We want to make sure that we are looking at a student's needs and make appropriate referrals and help students navigate campus resources. We don't do this work alone. We have so many amazing campus partners, from the wellness department, student health and counseling services, to our academic advisors in the different schools, to facilities, to housing, and to college housing and academic services. We work with so many campus partners. So, and this is to make sure that students are getting the most important resources they can. The next thing is we offer expertise in developing effective skills and strategies as students pursue their academic goals and rise to their own potential. So again, we are an academic support unit for all students. We work with students in all 12 schools here at Penn. So we're working with undergraduates, graduate students, professional students, law school, medical school, because oftentimes students just need to brush up on their learning habits. We also help students develop effective communication, problem solving, and self-advocacy skills. I think one of the biggest hurdles that students face when they come to college is they don't have that built-in support network they had when they were in high school. Now they have to learn, how do I ask my professor for advice? How do I go about talking to my resident advisor in my residential building? And we talk about those issues with students to try to give them the confidence of handling these issues on their own. We also encourage students to prioritize their mental health and well-being and make time for self-care. And we strive to destigmatize disability, normalize asking for help, and support accommodations that remove barriers and level the playing field. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more in just a bit. So we do academic support and disability services. Let me first focus on academic support. As I tell students, we can all use a little bit of assistance every once in a while. I look at our specialists as being kind of like personal trainers. They're working with a student one-on-one. Usually it's a 50-minute learning consultation. And it's a great way for the student to focus on what they want to focus upon, not what the learning specialist wants. So for example, if a student is really struggling with time management, that's what can be focused on. And there are some students that sometimes run into just a confidence, a crisis of confidence. So meeting with a person and to figure out, you know what, I'm doing everything the right way is something that could be really helpful for a student. So it can be anything from time management to how to be a better note taker, to how to handle STEM learning, how to prepare for a final exam. It really depends upon what the student wants to work upon. And sometimes students might meet with a learning specialist once a week, sometimes maybe once a month, maybe just once during their career. It really depends upon the student. And we have learning specialists who specialize we have one person who works with students who have disabilities. We have another who works with students who are from an international background. We have another person who works with STEM learners. And then we also have generalists, people who would work with anyone. And so this is all outlined on our website, just to give that information to you up front. We also offer workshops. And we offer workshops in particular at the beginning of the semester. So students will be learning about these workshops, and that could be an ideal way for a student just to get to know Penn a little bit more and to feel confident in their learning. We also collaborate with campus partners to offer programming. Sometimes we hear from faculty and residents in the college housing system. They want to put on a workshop for their students, and so they would work with our learning specialists to do that. This is all free. It is all, and again, it's really the student who wants to do this, right? Although a professor might encourage a student to think about it, it's really going to be the student who has to travel this pathway. So again, study strategies. To me, as someone who's done this work for many years, to me, everything begins with time management. When a student has good time management, everything else falls into place. We also do exam prep, academic writing, productivity, communication engagement, transition integration. That just gives you an overview of what we do as learning specialists. When should students see a learning specialist? Well, I always say start early. Even if you think you might not need the help, it might be a good idea to meet with a specialist at the beginning of the semester to start out well. Or if things are happening during the semester and things are not working out the way your student wants them to work out, this is another good time to reach out to a learning specialist, especially after getting a paper back or an exam back where, again, the student really worked hard on preparing for that test or for that paper, and they got a grade that might not be what they expected. Of course, talking to the professor is also highly advisable, but sometimes first starting with a learning specialist might give the student the confidence, then go to see the professor. Also around final exams and projects, another great time to come and talk to a learning specialist. So those are just some things with the learning specialist side of the house. We also offer tutoring services for undergraduate students. So we have drop-in models as well as one-on-one. It's outlined on our website. I highly encourage students to think about tutoring, especially for those large lecture classes, chemistry, math, economics. It's a great way for students to learn from a fellow peer educator who's already taken the class and did well in the class and has undergone training through the Weingarten Center. That is all going to be outlined on our website, so that would be where your student would find the information. Disability services. We work with students who might have a learning disability, attention deficit disorder, a sensory mobility issue, mental health, chronic health conditions. If your student had an IEP or 504 plan when they were in high school and they have not started the process yet, it's not too late. All they would have to do is go onto the Weingarten website, go to the upper right-hand corner, and you'll see My Weingarten Center. Click on that button, and then the student would start the process of asking for accommodations. So it's a confidential process, and if the student doesn't have the medical documentation on hand when they are starting the process, they should still go ahead with the process. They can always provide the documentation later on. The important thing is to be connected to one of our disability specialists who will then reach out to the student to start the conversation. So what does disability services do? They review the medical documentation to determine reasonable accommodations. So under the Americans with Disabilities Act, accommodations need to be considered to eliminate barriers to facilities and programs. The disability specialists will work collaboratively with students throughout the accommodation process, and things can change over the years. So sometimes what a student received in high school is not what they will receive here at Penn, but they might receive other accommodations that are comparable. And again, it's to eliminate those barriers to a program and facilities. They also help in coordinating the implementation of student accommodations. We work with the housing department, dining services, our Penn accessible transit service. So there are different people who we work with here on campus to make sure that a student's accommodation is implemented. As I always say, really accommodations, it really is a shared responsibility. It starts here in this office, but then it extends to other places here on campus. And then we also act as advocates for students with disabilities, helping students to develop their own confidence in speaking up. They never have to share their medical condition with their professors or their advisors. That is their decision. What is shared is what their accommodation would be. So the different accommodation types, academic, it can be anything from extended time for tests to access to class notes, use of assistive technology. Those are just some of the academic accommodations. Again, the decisions about accommodations are really rooted in the medical documentation and in that interactive process that takes place between the student and the disability specialist. Housing, some of your young people might have already gone through the housing process as far as accessibility. Again, it depends upon the person's medical condition and what their need might be. Dining services, I must say, I think we have a fabulous dining plan here at Penn. And we offer opportunities for students who might have food allergies to get customized meals that will meet their needs. Again, but we work with dining services closely. And then the physical access and transportation. We make sure that students have access to buildings. Even though Penn might be an old institution, it's an accessible institution. Most of the buildings have working elevators and ramps so that individuals who use wheelchairs or other devices are able to access the buildings. The Penn Access Transportation System, this is for students who sometimes have maybe a temporary injury. They might have had an operation on their leg, or they broke a limb and they need to get around campus. This one might be an opportunity for students to have access to the transportation service. So let me talk about the registration process. The first start, again, the accessibility request through the My Weingarten Center that's on our website. Again, it's a confidential process. Anything that the student shares through our portal is only within our office, and that's important for students to know that. The documentation of the disability. Again, it's going to depend upon the medical condition, but on our website, we have outlined the documentation guidelines. But again, if a student's not really sure what to do, that's why it's going to be important to be connected to a disability specialist who will then be able to help the student through that process. That initial appointment's so important, and that's the initial one. There might be other conversations that take place during the semester. So once the student has made this connection with a disability specialist, just like with a learning specialist, these conversations can continue to get the advice that a student will need in order to get the assistance they need. The approval process. So once the student has gone through the process, then they will get a letter through this secure portal. And then it's going to be the student's responsibility to follow the guidance that we provide about renewing their accommodation letters on a semester basis. So I know it's a lot of information at one time to get all, but here's the thing that keep in mind. The Weingarten Center website is really the starting place. And if a student needs to talk to someone, contacting our office is the best way of getting the help that they need. And so my recommendation is that students are not afraid to reach out to us, and we want to hear from students. We want to make sure that students are getting the necessary help. This is really the start of their self-advocacy. As I always say, you as parents, you have done your job. Now it's our time to do our job and help your student through navigating academic support as well as disability services. And that's our job. I also wanted to say, and Paige will talk about this also, your young person has been getting information through new student orientation. The TAP modules are just so essential for the student to watch. I'm actually watching them myself because I want to experience what students are learning prior to coming here at Penn. One last thing you'll see in the new student orientation guide is for those students who have disabilities and they want to learn more about the Weingarten Center, we do have an open house on August 20th from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. It's really open for parents as well as students. And it's just a great way for you to meet my amazing staff of colleagues who work in the disability area. That's just an overview. I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to let Paige take over, and I'll get back to you if there are questions that need to be answered. So Paige, it's all in your trusting hands.
Thanks so much, Jane. And I cannot underscore enough just how terrific a partner the Weingarten Center is. I was a student here many moons ago and made use of their time management skills training and all of that. So it's a terrific center, and I highly recommend making sure that you can get your student connected there. All right. Can you all see my screen, Jane? You got my... Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about academic integrity as well. So as I said at the top, we are the Center for Community Standards and Accountability. So we are oftentimes looked at kind of the disciplinary office at Penn. We house investigative oversight over all undergraduate students and many of our graduate students for violations of Penn policy. So our whole job, so CSA, really, our whole job is to uphold the university's standards. We investigate alleged violations of university policy, both conduct and academic integrity. We're going to be focusing on academic integrity today, just given this kind of next step in your students' academic life. We also do have other types of conduct and things that we investigate and try to help out with. Now, yes, are we often viewed as the big disciplinary office? Yes, but I want to be very clear to the families on this call, we're committed to student success. That's why we're here. Similar to kind of what Jane said is you all have done the work getting your student to this space. This is part of our job to make sure that they stay successful. In addition to all of that, we also house the university's restorative practices at Penn program. It's based in restorative justice, and it's really helpful in terms of community building and so on. We'll dive a little deeper into that here. Our restorative practices arm makes up half of our office. I mean, I just want to be very clear, like how dedicated we are to this approach to community building, as well as accountability within our community. So, you know, we use RP to infuse in college houses and during NSO, during mini circle processes and conversations that your students will be having to help manage conflict. Conflict's going to arise as folks live in a community together. And so we use the RP approach to help us manage that within our community. So again, we have the restorative circles, we have mediation, we have conflict management trainings, we have even some conflict coaching. So as Jane talked about earlier, this is really a moment for your student to advocate for themselves, perhaps for the first time, at least solely by themselves. And that can feel like it might be in conflict. And so we offer some conflict coaching of like, what might be the best way to approach this faculty member if you don't agree with the grade, or something's happening within your college house system and you've talked with the RA and things just don't seem to be going the way that you want it to be. We can be helpful in terms of going through that conflict coaching, because our hope is that we get to a place where we avoid the other half of the office ever having to be involved, right, in terms of investigating any misconduct or anything of that nature. So RP is a great option for folks to explore. If your student has already been involved in some community building work, we have different ways for folks to get involved in our office as well. You can check all of that out on our website, which I'm sure we'll drop in the chat a little bit later. But just know that there's ways to be involved both from the restorative practices side as well as a student kind of academic integrity side through our University Honors Council. So if your student has already been involved in that kind of work before, we'd love to have them stay involved here. Let's talk a little bit about academic integrity. What does it even mean, right? If we take it from our code, if any violation, right, that would be an activity that have the effect or intention of interfering with the education or the pursuit of knowledge here at Penn, or the fair evaluation of a student's performance, those are all prohibited. The code goes into a lot, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, to a lot of kind of specific instances, but really it's about making sure we're not interfering with the core of our educational mission here at Penn. So why is it important? We want to make sure for students who are engaging in this work that folks who are reading their work, they know where they fit in to the ongoing academic conversation, right? To the work that's being done on this type of analysis of XYZ paper or this lab report. We want to know where that fits in. We want to give appropriate credit, right? When we talk about plagiarism or other things of that nature, we want to give appropriate credit for the ideas, the thoughts, where they're due. The same that your student would want for themselves when their thoughts and ideas are being used outside of their own writing. We want to make sure that there's proper and fair evaluation of all students. We do that as we uphold our tenets of academic integrity. And the two at the bottom here are really my biggest thing of why this matters, is that we belong to an educational academic community. That's why we chose this place. That's why I work here, right? This is what really matters. And so we want to be able to trust our fellow community members, and that this thing that we're here for, the core of why we're here, right? To learn, to educate, to expand our minds and our learning and experiences, that we can trust that we're all coming at it from the same space, right? That we're not cutting corners, that we know that how we behave has impact on others and how they behave has impact on ourselves. It's kind of community building 101 in many ways. And then really it's really the value of what this means. When we walk away from a class, an experience, even in 4 years from here with the diploma, what does it mean to say that we graduated from Penn? Or what does it mean to say I got an A in this class, right? If I uphold my own academic integrity and the folks around me are doing the same, I can trust in that value. And that's what's really, really important here. Couple things that you will see as you go through those Thrive at Penn, those TAP modules, and your students are seeing. I do highly encourage you to watch those videos, not because I'm in one. I don't watch it for that, but to get to know the codes. That is kind of the priority premise of what we want folks to have as they come and join our campus. So we want folks to know the codes. In our office, we oversee the Code of Academic Integrity as well as the Code of Student Conduct. Code of Student Conduct basically says you've got to follow the rules, right? You've got to treat each other with respect. This is a community that cares about one another. And so as you enter it, we expect that you will care about your fellow students, about this place, right? That's really the essence of that Code of Student Conduct. Academic integrity goes into a little bit more detail about the ways that folks might engage in an academic setting. So some prohibitions within that, and I'm just going to move very quickly. This is nothing that you have to memorize or anything. This is all within the TAP module and within the code. But there's a prohibition on cheating, on plagiarism, on fabrication, which is kind of making up data, or multiple submissions. One of the things that your student will learn in the Thrive at Penn module is between that plagiarism and fabrication prohibitions is where we find a lot of generative artificial intelligence work and violations coming through. We do not have an overarching Penn policy on the use of things like ChatGPT and those other types of generative AI. Each class is going to have a different rule about it. You might be able to use it on some assignments and not others, on all assignments, or none at all. It's important for your student to know what's listed in their syllabus. The same way that they would know if it's a take-home exam or a sit-down exam, we want them to know specifically, am I allowed to use generative AI? And if so, how do I need to cite it? Or if I'm not allowed to use generative AI at all, that they make sure that they do not. So that's a big thing, because what we find is that generative AI oftentimes makes up data, fabricates sources, or misattributes sources. And so the students are not meaning to plagiarize or fabricate, but it ends up happening because of that use of generative AI. So we just want to be clear and to make sure that they're checking their work as well. Misrepresentation of academic records, facilitating academic dishonesty. This is really where we see, over collaboration. Again, this is going to be spelled out in the student syllabus, in the course syllabus, of what type of collaboration is appropriate for that course. An unfair advantage. So lying about the need for an extension, finding unauthorized practice tests, or knowing a friend who took the course last semester and they gave you access to their exam. All of those types of things are going to be considered prohibited under our Code of Academic Integrity. But let's talk about when folks come to our office, what we see, what really was behind it. And what we see more often than not, the top two reasons are that they're stressed about something that's outside of their academic world. The health of a loved one, the something happening, back at home, or conflict here on campus that has really kind of taken their emotional and sometimes even physical bandwidth away from their study. Those types of things are going to happen in our students' lives, right? Life doesn't stop when they come to Penn. Things still happen that are stressful and hard, and we have all of the different resources to help them navigate. But that stress, plus either taking too many courses or putting off too much work, this kind of 11th hour, we're right at the very end, I just have to get this in. That's when folks choose to perhaps use generative AI when they're not supposed to, or seek access to test materials that they shouldn't have. It's those types of moments that we see. It's not necessarily, although sometimes it is because they can and they have access to it, but typically it is some combo of, I don't have enough time, I'm too stressed, and I'm really worried about getting that great grade. And putting those things together oftentimes will lead our student to make the wrong choice. Now, you just heard from Jane a whole lot of information about learning specialists, about resources, about ways to make sure that our students are managing their time well, even in the face of really stressful things that are happening. We have a number of resources, as we've talked about, and as you've seen throughout these family panels, to make sure that the students have what they need to succeed. If there was ever a time where a student should feel empowered to reach out and ask for help or ask for a clarification from their faculty member, it's definitely in those moments of stress, right? We want them to do that in the very beginning of the semester when it's not stress, just to be clear. But when folks are feeling like they're backed into a corner and trying to get this stuff done, that's when that outreach we really, really want to have happen. And so encourage your student as you're talking with them and they say, oh, I have all these deadlines, I have this, I have that. Talk with them about talking with their faculty, reaching out to the Weingarten Center, making sure that they stay connected to the relevant resources to help them in their time here. Tips to avoid plagiarism or any other type of academic integrity, right? We want to make sure that there's enough time, right? We see the syllabus, we see the due dates. Students are busy. They're in 10 different clubs and they're doing all kinds of, outside the classroom learning, which is equally as important. And we want to make sure they're giving the time to the academic endeavor that they have here. Taking detailed notes, making sure that they are on top of the things that they want to include, right? Whether that be a lab report, a paper, a reflection essay, whatever it might be, we want to make sure that they've given the time and they've given the thought to how they want to approach that assignment. The big thing too, especially with generative AI, is when in doubt, cite it, right? If you're allowed to use it, or if you're quoting, or if you're doing anything like that, we want to make sure that folks are citing their sources to keep them, again, well within our academic integrity bounds here at Penn. So it means a lot to us. This is, again, I can't stress enough, this is an academic community that cares about one another, that cares about what it means as we move about this learning experience. And we care about what the value is when we take away from that, right? When we leave for this place, we want to be able to say that I have this Penn degree. I got this B+ in this class that I worked really hard for, and it means something to me. A-, A as well. We know we want really good grades, but this is something that is integral to the type of work that we do and the type of community that we want to have here. I'm going to take a look. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And I'm going to take a look at any questions, but we're happy to see any other ways that we might be able to help. One of the questions, I think a couple things, was just kind of making sure, will this information be covered during the students' live NSO? And the quick answer is yes. The students will be just like every other college on this in this nation, will be bombarded with information. And so as you know your student best, think about the things that they might not be thinking about. What we know from research is that students, because they're given so much information at one time, they pick out the things that they know they are going to need, right? Food, shelter, gym, those types of things. They don't think, oh man, I actually might need a tutor for this class that I don't feel that strong about, because they can't anticipate that yet. So as you know your student best, think about the things they might not be prioritizing and remind them, hey, I sat in on this session and you should think about the Weingarten Center. Or, hey, I've said it, I heard from this other place that, Penn doesn't have a big ChatGPT policy, but you should be sure you're looking at your syllabus, right, to avoid any type of potential conflict. So the quick answer is yes, we are going to be going over all of this. And the long answer, as I've just given to, is make sure you're kind of pointing your student in the direction that if you think they might not care about it right now, that they try to care about it.
So I want to tag on to what you just said, Paige. That was really good advice, all right? And I was going through some of the questions, and I think that one thing I would really encourage students to do is, if they have not started the process yet of registering with disability services based upon what they received in their high school days, they should start this week. And all they have to do is call 215-573 9235. It's on our website, so you don't have to memorize that. Just go to our website. Everything is outlined there. But what I also want to talk about is that someone brought up about writing. There's the Marks Undergraduate Writing Center, and most first-year students take a writing seminar, and the seminar classes are small. This is a good place for a student really to work on their writing. So that's another resource that I wanted to bring out that's really important for students. Also, I'm a pre-major advisor in the college. As a pre-major advisor, I work with a core group of students to help them go through like what courses they have to take. And the reason I'm bringing this up is each of the undergraduate schools have an amazing cadre of academic advisors. They're another part of this Penn journey, and they will be there for your students to help them navigate, oh, should I take this course? What's required? Do I need to stay in this course, or might need I drop the course or withdraw from a class? The academic calendar is so important for students to adhere to because there's really important information that students need to be aware of, and they will be getting email reminders through their individual schools. And again, this is another way for students to stay on top of everything. I know it's a lot, it seems like a lot, but really, as long as students are reading their emails and not being afraid to ask those questions. I always say to a student, I might not know the answer to the question, but I know how to direct that person to the right resource. Another question that came up in the chats was just about like what kinds of documentation. Again, my recommendation is at least start the accessibility process, provide whatever documentation you have on hand, and then let my colleagues, the disability specialists, take over with those individual conversations with your student. So I'm going to turn it back to Paige. Maybe Paige has some additional information to share.
I don't think so. Just a couple other, Jane, if you'll just repeat the writing resource one more time. And then there was a couple other questions around just some logistical things, and you'll get links about to be able to view all of the different videos and panels that have happened throughout this week. So feel free to, I think it's earlier up in the chat, click through there and make sure that you get the videos of all of the recordings. There were a couple questions around how to, best have visibility into students' academic world, and the best thing that I can tell you is to talk with your student, and see how much they want to share with you, and if that has been your relationship of like helping them manage their time. When I am also a pre-major advisor, one of the things that I say to students as they come in is everything you had that made you so successful to get here, you will likely need as you endeavor into this. It might look different. It might come from a different source, right? But if you had a therapist that helped you, if you had accommodations that helped you, if you knew that you needed to be at, whatever sport practice every single afternoon and that helped clear your head, you're going to want to have those types of resources here. So if you played a really important role in their academic journey and helping them keep deadlines and so on, you may want to talk to them about, hey, let's, at least as we first get started, let's make sure we're in clear communication about what this is going to look like. And then when you identify perhaps the Weingarten Center to be the place to help you manage all of this, let's be in communication around that.
Thank you, Paige. And again, the name of that center, it's the Marks Undergraduate Writing Center. It's only for undergraduate students. And it's a really great way for students to really build their skills in writing. We know that your young people can write beautifully, but now what they have to learn is how to write for different purposes, whether it's for an English class, a history class. So that's where the center can be really important for them. The last piece of advice I have is going back to knowing about grades. So now because your young person is transitioning into college, there are FERPA rules, which that means that we are respecting a young person's privacy. So if you would contact my office, we can provide general information to you, but we cannot talk about your son or daughter's actual record, okay? We're only going to be talking about just general academic support services as well as disability services. I think that's really important. That's a real transition from the high school to the college. And so I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page with that. Let me see, I'm just looking at some other questions that might have come up and see if we can give you information. So if someone brought something about the housing system, I highly encourage you just to go onto the housing website, and there's a lot of information there for you. I will say, even for me, and I've been here several years now, I am still learning new things about Penn. And the way I do that is by reading what's on our websites, and also reading whatever newsletters or going to meetings. That's how I really learn about Penn. So it really is a holistic approach of learning that I try to communicate with students as well. Paige, is there anything else that you would like to talk about before maybe we end our session here?
Yeah, I think the last thing is there are some specific kind of academic questions. Make sure that your student is talking with their academic advisor, with their pre-major advisor, and with their homeschool, and to make sure that they're getting those kind of specific programmatic academic program questions answered. But other than that, I am so appreciative of you all joining us today and learning a little bit about both of our centers and the ways that we help kind of build and uphold this community. We are around. You can find both of our websites pretty simply. We're all over the TAP module. So definitely, again, we can't stress that enough. And again, our appreciation for you all joining this with us today. And we can't wait to meet your student this fall.
Thank you, Paige. I totally agree with everything you said. So thank you so much. And we can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks.